Okay, so why does it come after action and not before? And why is it so important that we start actually before we're ready? That's what we're going to be talking about on today's Speak and Get What You Want podcast here with Francis Jones. How you doing today, Francis?
I am fantastic. How are you, my man?
I'm doing real well. And as we talk about this confidence coming after you take action and not before, and specifically, Francis, in conquering something that we call learned helplessness. And learned helplessness is actually a psychological state where you've tried things before, you've tried to set goals, you tried to be productive, so you start and you experience defeat, so you find yourself just kind of going through the motions of life. And I feel like, Francis, people more often people are doing that than ever before, where they just feel like, oh, whatever happens, happens. I'm just gonna go do my thing. And so we're gonna talk about really acknowledging this learned helplessness, and then more specifically, how you can overcome it.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, you talk about it being more prevalent in today's day and age than it ever has been before. And I think part of that is, I mean, think about when we were kids. Most everything that happened to us, both successes and failures, happened in this tiny little world that
Mm.
we lived in. It was only the 5 or 10 people that were right around you. You ask a girl out, she says no. Well, who knows? It's just the couple of guys that you say. But now everything happens on social media, and it happens. My kids are friends with friends that have moved away for the last 10 years. They've known these kids. And if one of our friends moved away when we were kids, you don't ever see them again. So everything, both successes and failures, happen on such a large scale that it's really easy to retreat within yourself and say, you see everything that everyone else is doing, and you see everything that's happening around you, and you say, well, that's just not me. I'm just going to keep rolling along. I'm just going to keep going. And it's really easy to fall into those patterns that you just mentioned.
Wow, that's powerful, Francis. That we succeed and fail on such a larger stage right now, that
Huge.
that people begin to protect themselves, and they start saying, "Well, I don't want to fail publicly like that, and so I'm going to just live a little bit smaller. I'm not going to put myself out there as much because I've tried before." And oh man, that was so embarrassing. I'm not going to do that again.
Right. It's just putting yourself out there is, you'd think with social media that you're in this position to say, oh, like there's so much potential out there. But if we're not careful, we look at it on the flip side. We look at it the negative. We look at the potential for failure versus the potential for achievement, for accomplishment.
Right. And by the way, that negative thought process that we all have, that creeps in and grows and grows and grows within our mind if we don't do something immediately to stop it. And
Yeah.
and so,
Mhm.
Francis, I want to talk specifically about three things that I've been thinking about with how to overcome this learned selflessness. And number one is starting, making a decision to start, maybe small, but putting yourself out there. Just start putting yourself out there. And for many of you, it might be more natural just to do it in a small way, but set small, winnable goals to say, you know what, I am going to start putting myself out there more than I ever have before.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. Again, because of the world we live in, we see the successes of people, and we say, "Oh, look at how successful they are! They come so naturally to them. They are so like." Oh, if only I could be like gifted like that person. And we don't see the 10,000 times they failed at it already. We think about if you've ever had, I say opportunity, I'm not sure it's really an opportunity, but the chance maybe is a better word, to be around an influencer who's recording their natural content. Rochelle and I were in Italy. We got to take our 30-year anniversary. Went to Italy, and we were at the Trevi Fountain, and it's really crowded. So you're just looking for an inn to be able to stand near the fountain and get a picture near the fountain. And we're walking down these stairs off to the side, and we see this woman, and she's doing the hair thing, and she's doing all this exotic thing, and what would appear to be her boyfriend is like filming her, and she's laughing, and then she's like, doggone it, except for she's using foul language. Doggone it, John. I told you to make me look more natural here and look more natural there. Let's take it from the top again. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? Like, no one's going to see that. All they're going to see is this beautiful woman who is like fancy free and just living. And she's off to the side where you can't see the crowds. And it's unreal to me. We see the finished product, but we never see the work that it takes to get to it. And I'm not suggesting that we emulate her, but in terms of like the work that it takes to get to the finished product, all we see is the finished product.
Mm.
And so we think, well, I can never do that. Well, sure you can. Sure you can. You just got to start. And that's where we get paralyzed.
Absolutely. And I love that you bring that up, Francis, because we see everybody's finished product, but we don't see all the blood, sweat, and tears that went into that, and most people, Francis, the decade of greatest achievement for most people is in their 50s and 60s, right? But
Mhm.
we sit back and we think to ourselves, oh my goodness, why haven't I accomplished more? Why haven't I done more? And what it does is, like you said, it's completely debilitating. Like you can't even move sometimes because you're so caught up in, oh my goodness, I can't do this. And that learned helplessness can be so powerful and so restricting for you to be able to get where you need to be. And so I love you bring up just set small wins, and then, Francis, write down the wins that you had, write down your successes, acknowledge the successes, because sometimes we have little wins throughout the day and we're not even acknowledging them.
Oh, I think it's more than sometimes. I think it's really easy to forget about the things that went well, the things that we did well. And what's really interesting, you and I were talking about this a little while ago as part of our academy stuff that we do. And you mentioned that when you're dealing with other people, it's really easy for you to say, oh, maybe you should be easy. Don't be so hard on yourself. You just focus on this. But when it comes to, you turn it inwardly or you talk to your kids, you're maybe a little harder on them, right?
Oh yeah.
And so when I'm talking to my kids who are struggling in this instance, and they say, well, this was so terrible. I'm like, what about this and this and this? And that's something to think positively about. But when I do it myself,
Hmm.
I never look at the positive things. I only look at the things that went wrong that day. I don't look at the fact that I was able to respond to these 5 things or solve these 3 problems, or I was able to, I got up and I walked for 45 minutes or whatever. All I do is I look at the scale, right? I don't
Right.
look at the little victories. And it's really easy to help other people see it sometimes, but not to help ourselves.
Oh, so true.
We very often discard those things because we're that learned helplessness. We're like, because if I acknowledge the positive, then I've got to build on those. Whereas if it's the negative, then, well, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing because it's,
Yeah,
whatever.
it's that's so important, and so as you really start small and take those steps, just and acknowledge them, acknowledge your wins, take those small steps that lead you to number 2. And you touched on this, Francis. Change the story that you tell yourself. You have to learn helplessness lives in internal dialogue. Nothing I do works. I can't ever change anything. But the reality is, Francis, if you just change your internal dialogue to nothing I do works with I haven't found the right strategy yet, then it changes it changes your energy, it changes the way you think, and it really helps you overcome that learned helplessness, saying, okay, I just haven't found it yet, but I'm going to, and it's going to turn out well. And we have that positive energy, that positive mindset, instead of that internal dialogue of pessimism and negativity. This episode is brought to you by 10 Days to Create Clarity, a breakthrough course inside the Speak and Get What You Want Academy. If you've ever craved more meaning, more momentum, but not knowing where to start, well, you're not alone. The problem isn't motivation, it's clarity. These 10 days give you exactly that. Simple direction, real confidence, and clear next steps. You know exactly what you want, make decisions without second guessing, go from drifting to taking action, and align your life with what actually matters. And you'll feel a real shift fast. If you're tired of scrolling, stuck, or waiting for life to make sense, stop waiting. Join the Speak and Get What You Want Academy and start the 10 Days to Create Clarity course today. Go to speakandgetwhatyouwant.com.
Absolutely. Words matter, right?
Mm,
And both you and I are big into education and training. We've been doing this our whole lives. And I actually have been a teacher in the past. And I really has helped me to really move away from, this capital T truth, right? And say, those things are wrong, or you did this wrong, and pivot that to, you might want to consider this as an alternative, right? And there are some things that are just out and out wrong, right? That don't work or that aren't workable. But when we pivot our language to what you mentioned earlier, I haven't found the thing that works yet. That's different than saying I failed at all these other things. And I know people listening might say, "Well, that's a little foo-foo," or you're glossing over, or you're pulling punches, or you just aren't being direct. And I guess you can look at it that way, but that's just another evidence of, I think, what we're talking about.
mm,
The reality is that if something didn't work, it is better to look at it and say, well, that's just something that I can avoid next time, or I can pivot to this next time versus that failed, right?
right.
When we focus on the failure versus the impact of what we can learn, it changes the way we view everything. And I think most of us, if we think about the times that we're able to let things go, and able to let like things bounce off of us and not really stick and bring us down, that's when we're able to say, well, yeah, I know that piece didn't work, but these other things were really, really good. We talk about sports, and my team, I thought they were going to play better, but hey, listen, they won 8 games and they lost their starting quarterback for most of the season. They didn't have their starting wide receiver, their 2 All-Americans. They won 8 games. That's pretty good. Like, I mean, think of how bad the season could have gone.
Right.
Like, why don't we do that more often than say, I can't believe they only won 8 games. They were ranked in the preseason. They were supposed to go to the playoffs. They went to the playoffs last year. Why do we focus on that versus, hey, it could have been so much worse? This is what all we have to do is tweak this little thing next year, and we'll be like, why can't we do that and be that guy, right?
Right. That's key. It's key, Francis. And that internal dialogue. I was thinking, like Cassie and I were dealing with kind of a stressful situation, and she turned to me and she goes, "Are you stressed about this?" And I was so confident that it was going to work out. I said, "No, I'm not stressed. I'm just curious." And she goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "It's going to work out really well. I'm just curious right now how it's going to work out."
Right. What
And
does that look like?
and you should have seen her face completely shifted. Her energy completely shifted, as did mine, because I was like, wow, that was a good response. I just came out, right? And and so the reality is her energy shifted, her face, her facial expression shifted, because I was like, no, it's working out. It's going to work out. But I'm not sure exactly yet. So I'm kind of curious as to how it's going to work out. That does not mean you just sit back. It does not mean you don't take any action, but you take action with the confidence knowing it's going to work out.
Right. Is this a dead end or is it a roadblock?
Right.
Like, you can get around a roadblock. A dead end, like, there's nothing you can do. And there are dead ends in life. I'm not trying to gloss over that there are powerful things that happen, but I think those are farther and fewer between than we really think they are. We look at it and we find something and something doesn't work, and we're like, well, I guess that's the end of that. Well, is it? I mean, I love that response you gave to Cassie. Like, I'm curious. Like, be curious, right? There's a TV show, Ted Lasso, and I've never watched the show, but I've seen the clip on reels and things like that. And it's this scene of playing darts, and obviously it culminates with our hero winning. But one of the things he says is, he quotes Walt Whitman, and be curious.
Hmm.
Like, just be curious. Like, if we're so tied to, we have the answers and this didn't turn out the way we wanted, so that means it's wrong, versus that's interesting. That's interesting that happened. I wonder how it's going to work out now. I wonder what that success looks like, even though it might not be what we thought it was going to be.
Right, right. And I just add, Francis, let's be confidently curious. Be
Yeah.
confidently curious, knowing that things are going to work out. Years ago, I was in a meeting where somebody said, I want you to write down 3 of the most stressful things that you dealt with last year. Right. and that were really things you were worried about, did they all work out? Did they all have a resolution? Is it all good? And as I wrote these three things down and reflected on them, I was like, wow, they did. They actually did work out. But Francis, I was so stressed at times about each one of those individual. And that stress and that internal dialogue is truly wasted energy. You're
It,
just wasting the energy that you could have being put towards productive activity, but because of that stress and because, oh, I don't think I can do anything to change it. Oh, and you have that internal dialogue that's literally destroying your ability to go crush it and be successful.
it is that you're 100% correct, and it is so important for us to think about that, and especially when you think about it from you flip it from the front side and staring at, like, if you said to me, Francis, I want you to write down the three things you're most concerned about going into this new year. Here's, like, what is it you're really worried about, right? If I wrote those things down, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, right? What is it I'm concerned about? It's when we focus on that and worry about it coming up that we really run into problems. Let me be a little vulnerable here for a second with you, Chad. When I was in seventh grade, actually, I was sixth grade going into seventh grade. Some of you listening to this podcast may not remember, but back in the big difference in Arizona, at least where I was, sixth grade to seventh grade, you were going into junior high. And in junior high, you had PE every day. And at the end of PE, you had to shower. And back then, showers were gang showers. It was just a big pole in the middle with these showers. So I was going to have to take off my clothes in front of other guys. And I was really nervous about it because I was a little bit chunky and, no one ever seen me naked. And I didn't want to be. And fortunately, they don't do that anymore. Fortunately, they have privacy shields and all that stuff. But they didn't back then. And I remember I went to, we did a tour of the junior high and they showed us the showers, and I worried about it for months and months. I was worried about this activity, and I just all of a sudden I remember in the middle of my seventh grade year, I remember thinking, oh, I was so worried about that, and I don't even remember the first time I can't even think back to the first time doing it, that I spent so much time and energy worrying about something, and then I realized that it wasn't that big a deal, and I wasn't like it. Just I don't even remember. Like, I can't put a finger on how I felt about it. That was even just a couple months after it happened. So we spend all this time and energy worrying about something that turns out to be not much at all. And what could I have put that energy towards? Now, obviously, I was a sixth grader and I was a
Right.
kid and all that other stuff. But we do the same thing now. We do the same thing now. I mean, I had a emergency surgery. I had my gallbladder out. You know that, and they put this tube inside of me, and I had that tube, and I was so nervous about getting it pulled out. And so I was at the doctor, and I was sitting there at the table, and the doctor, I'm like, this is going to be the worst. I'm like, just let me brace myself, doc. I'm laying on the table. I'm like, okay, I'm ready. I know this is going to be the worst. And he's like, it's out. I'm like, what do you mean it's out? He's like, it's gone. I took it out at the beginning, but I just thought it was interesting what you were saying. So I was worried all about all this pain coming, and he's like, it was out. It was done. It was nothing. We do that all the time.
All the
All the
time,
time.
but it goes back to what we've shared before, Francis, where fear is simply false expectations appearing real. They
Right?
are false expectations appearing real. I mean,
Yeah.
it's funny. My son, he plays basketball, and he stole the ball, and the person that he stole it from was frustrated. So when he went up for a layup to score, he got fouled pretty hard, and he came down on his wrist pretty hard. And so we got it x-rayed, everything looked good, but then there was some area that was kind of, questionable. So they sent us to the orthopedic surgeon, and we were with the orthopedic surgeon, and he's like, yeah, I don't, I don't know. I think I need to cast this for a month. And my son, who, was worried about this, said, whoa, 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 stop. He's in ninth grade, and he goes, whoa, whoa, stop. You're casting this for a month? And he goes, yeah. Now keep in mind, in high school sports, a month is like a good chunk of the season. And he goes,
Yeah.
yeah, no, you're not doing that. And he goes, what do you mean? And this is the orthopedic surgeon, and he's telling, and my ninth grade son goes, are you confident that it's broken? And he goes, no. And he goes, "So why are you casting it?" This is my ninth grader saying this to the surgeon. And he goes, "Well, I want it to be preventative." And he goes, "Can't my pain be preventative and I'll let you know?" And he goes, "I mean, I guess." And he goes, "You're not casting it." And he goes, "Okay." And I was like, and so I was just sitting there watching
That
this.
sounds like a Kirby,
I was
dude. That
watching
sounds
this
like you, man.
exchange, and he goes, "Okay." And my son, and hopefully he's not doing any, people listening going, "Oh no, he's doing more damage." But the reality is his pain is subsiding and he's doing well. But he was saying, "No, no, 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 no. This is not what's going to happen. We are going to do this." And he was dictating what the future was going to look like rather than being reactive, right?
Yeah, and what I love about that though too is that because that can be misconstrued as well, right? I mean, if he walks in there and his legs in two pieces,
Right.
I love that he asked questions like, "Is it broken?" Like he didn't just jump into
Right.
that. Like he asked the questions. I'm sure you and Cassie had follow up questions as well. Can he do more damage? And is it going to cause me permanent, like what, all that stuff,
Well,
right?
we made him take it to another orthopedic surgeon, and then I was like, "Have another and he goes, "Okay, I'll have someone else." And the other person said, "Ah, it doesn't look broken." And so we're like,
But I
"Okay."
love that he asked the questions. He was bold. I mean, like that's really bold. I mean, because the answer might have been at the end of the day, it might have been, yeah, it needs to be casted, right? That's fine. Like but what do they say? Fortune favors the bold.
Right.
Like he was bold about it, and he asked, and sometimes that doesn't work out for us. But I don't know that you're ever worse off for asking the questions and having that confidence and saying, listen, this is what I want. Like this is
Right.
what I want to have happen. And so I really love that. And he obviously learned that from you and Cassie.
Well, but which leads us to number 3, Francis, that I just want to touch on here as we're getting ready to wrap up is surround yourself with the right people. Okay, learn helplessness. And if you take one of these 3, okay, as we talk about learn helplessness, number 1, to overcome it, to overcome that I can't do it's not going to change the outcome, to overcome that one, start small and record those victories. Number 2, change your internal story. But number 3, Francis, in my opinion, might be the most important, and that's surrounding yourself with the right people. Because if you surround yourself with people that don't buy into the learned helplessness, if you surround yourself with those kind of people, then you'll be stunned at the outcome.
Oh, there's no question. I don't think there's even any question that number 3 is the most important thing. You have to surround yourself. If you surround yourself with yes men or women,
Mm,
if you surround yourself with people who are only going to parrot the things you say, you're never going to be able to overcome anything because when you say, "Well, this won't work," yeah, you're right, Francis. That won't work. You're totally right. Yes, sir. We're so glad. What do they say? If you're the smartest person in the room, you've got a pretty dumb room. Like you've got to surround yourself with people who are willing to challenge and push back. And I don't mean they have to be jerks about it, but we all know our own personality and what is it going to take, like I know you and we're really aligned on a lot of things, but one of the things we're not aligned on is the movie Notting Hill. I love the movie Notting Hill. I
terrible.
think it's
It's a terrible
one of my
movie.
favorite rom-coms. I love it. But we'll set that aside for a moment. At the end, when Will, the main character, is kind of lamenting on this final relationship thing that he had with Julia Roberts' character, and he's explained to all the room why he's decided not to forgive her and go back with her. And they're all like, "Yeah, you're right. I saw her. She's a vixen. She's an actress. She can put on a show." And then this other guy walks in the room, and he is the kind of the freak and the weird guy. And he explains it to him, and he looks at him. He's like, "You're an idiot, dude. You're a moron." And then finally, everyone's like, "Yeah, you had a really pretty girl say she loved you, and you said." So then it turns because he had someone willing to stand up
Mm.
to his and challenge his perceptions, and that is so important. It's so important to have someone that's willing to say, "Are you sure that you're thinking about this from all areas?" Because when we don't have that person in our lives, we can't elevate. We just can't do it.
We can, and they actually contribute to it, Francis. So
Yeah.
like when you say, "Oh, I don't think anything I am going to do is going to change that outcome." You're right. You're probably right. You need to be spending time with people who take ownership, who don't buy into that negativity. The
Oh,
reality is, we
100.
talk about, people match their energy, but belief is contagious. If you believe you can accomplish great things and the people around you believe, I got a text message from Reagan yesterday, and she's just like, 2026 is going to be the greatest year ever. And that belief is like, okay, you want to surround yourself with those types of individuals.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you. That is, and I was thinking about it when you were talking about, like, well, okay, Chad, what's our takeaway, right? When I teach a lesson, I was like, okay, what's our takeaway from this lesson? And I'm glad I didn't ask the question, because this is the takeaway from the lesson. Like, because I think it's reasonable for me to say, man, I just don't know, how do I pivot that? You want to start pivoting it? Find people that will challenge your assumptions. Find people that, and I'm not talking about being a jerk to you, right?
Right.
But
No.
find someone that's willing to say, "Are you sure about that? Are you sure you've thought through everything? Like, are you sure you haven't tried this? Or are you sure it didn't just fail because of these other things?" Like, when we go in, you and I have worked at the same places before. Just because something hasn't worked before doesn't mean it won't work going forward. So this whole, we've tried that before. Well, okay, so what? So what? Like, there, now is not then, right?
Right.
We've got better technology, we have different customers, we have different tools, we have a different product, we have a different leadership team, we have different price, whatever. There's lots of different levers, right? And so if you can only pull one lever, it's finding somebody or a group of people that are willing to say, and I'm not talking again about being a jerk about it, I'm saying, who are willing to say, are you sure about that? Are you really sure? Like, and someone that you can confide in, you trust, that is willing to say, I don't know, man. Like, is that something you really, have you considered the implications of that? Or have you tried it this way? Have you thought about that? Like, that is the greatest piece of advice someone can take away from this.
Absolutely. And that person has to be positive. They have to build you
Right.
up, not pull you down. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah. 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 I
And
couldn't
that
agree with
person, when they go, you know what? No, I think you can do more. I think you can absolutely accomplish that. And you don't have to currently live in the state you're in right now. Those types of people, you need to be very selective, Francis, as especially as we're starting a new year, to be thinking to yourself, okay, who are those people that are going to really help me get to where I need to be?
Absolutely. And we've talked about this, coaches. We've both worked with coaches before. Coaches have coaches for that very reason.
Right.
We start looking at coaches and they spend time helping people, but they need help too. And so they surround themselves with people. And so we talk about community. That's one of the things we talk about with the academy and the community in the academy, is that having other people that are driving in the same direction you are, that are willing to challenge those assumptions, that learn helplessness, they're willing to push back against that. That's a mission critical, man. You have to have that.
Absolutely. And understand this, Francis, it's so important to note that you are not unmotivated.
Right.
You're simply unconvinced that your effort will matter, right?
Yeah.
And so that's important to remember. Don't buy into just like, "Oh, I'm just not motivated." No, you're not. You're just not convinced that your
Right.
effort's going to matter. So
That's
think
that,
think
man.
think about that
Oh,
phrase.
we could do a whole podcast on just that concept right there. This idea of this false narrative of motivation, like what that really means. Yeah, that is
It's so true, Francis, that when people say, "I'm just not very motivated," that's not true. You're just
right.
not
You're just not
convinced.
convinced it's going to work.
Exactly. That's exactly it.
That's, well, man. Write that down. That's something we got to talk about.
That's a future podcast. Francis, always great being with you. Overcoming learned helplessness absolutely can happen and will happen if you do those things. Have an amazing day, Francis. Take care.
You too. Thanks.
Bye now.